A huge welcome from UJIA for tonight's Yom Hazikaron Ceremony. My name is Ben Shapiro. I'm the chair of UK programming here in Manchester. Before the pandemic, we gathered annually on Yom Hazikaron and heard inspirational speakers, either physically or joining us online direct from Israel. As chair, I was honored to host these interviews, and it is my privilege to once again do so this evening. Last year, when we took the whole Tekes online, I certainly did not expect to be back on your screens again this year. However, in the absence of our being able to stand together physically, and given we were able to reach so many people with over 4,000 views online, we are once again gathered virtually to pay our respects. With contributions from guests in London, Manchester, Leeds, and of course Israel, we have created a national event this evening that will hopefully do justice to the strong bonds that exist between the UK and the State of Israel. For more information on the other programming planned over the next few days of Yom HaZikaron and Yom Ha'atzmaut, please visit www.ujia.org/YH73. This will be noted again on the slide at the end of the event. Tonight, over the course of the next 45 minutes, we will honor Israel's fallen soldiers and victims of terror. Tonight, we honor all their memories by hearing about just one of them, about Tom Farkash, a young Air Force pilot killed during the Second Lebanon War in 2006. We will speak to Tom's mother and we'll hear the words of the song Milyon Kochavim, or A Million Stars. The song has become an anthem to all those who fell in the Lebanon War. It was written by one of Tom's friends and performed by Tom's sister Amit, who we will hear more about later. We will honor the fallen with the words of El Malei Rachamim, recited by Chief Rabbi Ephraim Mirvis. And we will also hear from Colonel Tidhar, Israel's military attaché to the UK. As well as our honoured guests based in London, we are very lucky to be joined by Chazan Albi Chait in Leeds and Chazan Tzvi Weiss in Jerusalem, who will close the ceremony. But first, I'm delighted to introduce Sarah Baruch and Karine Levy to say a few words. Sarah and Karine are two of the many shlichim supported by UJIA and the Jewish Agency, who work across our communities in London, Leeds, Glasgow, Liverpool, and Manchester. They work with the schools, the youth movements, and our local shuls. They both completed their military service before joining us for a 2-year shlichut, and we are so grateful to them, as throughout this incredibly difficult time, they have delivered virtual programming and informal education to an outstanding level. Sarah, Karine.
Shalom, my name is Sarah Baruch, and I am UJIA Shlicha in Manchester.
And I am Karine Levy, UJIA Shlicha in Leeds.
Like all Israelis, Yom HaZikaron is a difficult day. On the eve of Israel's 73 Independence Day, we remember and honor those who lost their life.
Before Yom Ha'atzmaut, celebrating the Jewish state, we should remember above all those who made that independence possible and gave us the privilege of being free people in our land.
On this day, I remember long nights of worries and anxieties on the part of my mother and on the part of every mother in Israel who sent her child to defend the homeland. The fear of the telephone, the fear of knowing, and the lack of knowledge.
On this day, I think of the children we were, growing up in the madness of the Second Intifada. How we used to collect amulets of Tehillim or Tefilat HaDerech in our wallets as a certificate of insurance. How I used to be scared every time I took the bus. How I was walking past so many monuments in my hometown, Afula, here killed in a terror attacks. How I used to go to school with a gas mask. I remember, in the summer before starting high school, I spent the entire summer in the shelter shielding from the bombs in the Second Lebanon War.
On this day, the significance of the shlichut is evident. The understanding of the importance of the connection between the Jews of diaspora and the land of Israel is strengthened in my head.
I feel very lucky to be part of the UK's Jewish community, which makes sure to honor this day even when physically we are very far away from each other, but emotionally we are close.
On this day, we remember the pain grieving families carry with them every day. We remember that our independence has paid a heavy price. In the Tefillah, we bow our heads in eternal gratitude to those who have paid that price, Jews and non-Jews, all who have fallen in protecting the state of Israel.
On this day, the whole country is silent and cries of tears emanate from it. The flags of Israel fly at half-mast. The meaning of being Israeli burns within you. On this day, we put disputes, quarrels, good and bad things all aside, for the fallen and the understanding of this special and painful day.
On this day, the word of Zev Jabotinsky come to mind. Im tova v'im ra'a, im kala v'im kasha, im zola v'im yakara, zohi artzi. If good and if bad, if easy and if hard, if cheap and if expensive, this is my country.
Now let us all stand together for a minute of silence.
Thank you, Sarah and Corinne. Tom Farkash was killed in a tragic accident in 2006 during the Second Lebanon War. Tom was an exceptional young person. Anat, Tom's mother, will of course tell us more, but just from the very fact that he was an Air Force pilot, we know that he was a young man who was held in supremely high regard by the most senior levels of Israel's military establishment. Anat has been active in the field of education and personal empowerment since well before 2006. So we know that tonight we will leave not only having honored Tom's memory, but I expect we will be inspired by Anat's personal resilience and empowered by her words. Now, given that we love our Jewish geography, it's worth placing Tom in context of his family history and in the context of the incredible melting pot that is Israel. Anat is Israeli-born, the daughter of Russian parents who fled via the Ukraine and Poland, reaching Israel in the early years of the state. Anat's husband, Doron, is also Sabra. Doron's mother was a child refugee coming to Israel as part of the Youth Aliyah. This was a program run by the Jewish agencies Henrietta Salt, which coordinated the rescue of hundreds of lone children throughout the 1930s and 40s. Doron's father was Hungarian, coming to Palestine to guard Jewish settlements before 1948, and who ultimately ended up fighting for the British Army during the Second World War. So Anat, with that connection, we welcome you to our homes in Britain from your home in Caesarea.
I'm very honored. Thank you.
Anat, when we spoke, you were surprised that I was so interested in your own family background. But given everything that I've just shared, I'm glad I asked, and maybe that's somewhere we can start. How do you feel that Tom's knowledge of his family and their various journeys to Israel, how do you think that shaped him as he grew up?
First of all, I think Tom grew up in a very Zionistic environment. Our home was exceptionally Israeli, even when Tom was born actually in Canada, in Toronto, Canada, and lived there till he was 8. Most of our friends were Israeli, yet he went to a Jewish school. So he was constantly intermixed between his Jewish heritage and his Israeli background. Tom, of course, when we were living in Canada, we visited Israel many, many times. And he was well aware of our connection and our roots to Israel.
And just to set the scene, Anat, sorry, because we missed the fact that actually you went to Canada as part of your husband's training, and then you came back to Israel in the 90s.
Exactly. In the early 80s, in actually the year Tom was born, which was 83, we moved from my husband's studies to Toronto, where my family is originally from. And we ended up staying there for 9 years. And after 9 years, we've decided, when Tom was in between grade 2 and grade 3, and my daughter Amit was 2 years old, that if we don't move back, we'll never make Aliyah. So within 3 months, we decided that we're moving back. It was 91, the year of the Iraqi war and the bombardment of Iraq on Israel. And I just couldn't see myself living through a situation where I was not part of Israel during such a time.
So your grandparents came to Israel. You were both born. You and your husband were born in Israel, but your parents went to live in Canada, and then you came back to Israel early on in that journey. Is that right?
Yes. When I was 7-year-old, my parents immigrated to Canada. Economical immigration, and after 7 years there, I said enough is enough. I need to reconnect with my roots. And at 14, I returned to Israel. I found myself an amazing foster family on a kibbutz, and that's where I lived till I got married.
So that was where your journey of personal empowerment started, and talk about Tom and how. I mean, he has a mother who rushed back to Israel after only 7 years of being taken away by her parents. He's got grandparents from many walks of life who make it into Israel. That was a part of his journey, his own journey.
Exactly. When children in Israel are in grade 7, they have to do a roots project. And when Tom went into the roots of all his various grandparents, we saw that he had grandparents who made Aliyah to Israel from all the various diasporas, whether it's from my biological parents from the Ukraine, my husband's family from Germany and Hungary, my kibbutz parents from Iraq and Syria, and my father's wife who is from Morocco. So all this went into his roots project, and he was well aware of the price that they all paid and how much the Zionistic, the depth of their Zionistic beliefs that made them cross into Israel across many different ways. Many of them before the state of Israel, they had to enter Israel under the radar of the British and settle here and fight for this country. So this is something that he learned very early on in his life. And when he was in grade 11, he went on a trip to Poland on the March of the Living, visited the various concentration camps, the Jewish ghettos, and the Jewish villages, learned the history of the Shoah, and that enforced his belief that we need the state of Israel in order to be a sustainable people for all Jewish people living everywhere.
Yeah. And in terms of his training, I mean, let's just set the scene as well. Doron, your husband, was a pilot himself in the Israeli Air Force. He then became an El Al pilot. Forgive me. So flying was clearly in his blood. What can you tell us about the rigor of Tom's experience? Because it's not just about it being running in the family, is it? It's the recruitment, the training, the role itself is a rigorous role.
Well, exactly. Actually, with Tom, in Tom's army training course, he was there with his best friend, whose father is Doron's best friend from his pilot training days. And let's say that the friend didn't last the 2-year training, and Tom ended up finishing the training. Basically, about 1,000 people, young people a year out of that tens of thousands that are recruited to the army every year, only 1,000 get into the army training course. There are 2 courses every year, 500 a course, and at the end of the course, 45 people finished in his course. 45 people became pilots. So the statistics are very much against you finishing the course. You really want to do it. You need to have not only natural abilities to be a pilot, but you also need to be able to stand by a lot of stress and be able to function under different conditions. And they really put you through the hoops during the pilot training course.
Yeah,
it's considered the highest course in the Israeli army.
Absolutely. And you suggested when we spoke that he was living 2 lives almost at one point. He was living his Tel Aviv life and then his work life, which was 2 very different worlds to be a part of.
Exactly. Tom finished his as an Apache combat helicopter pilot, and the squadron of the Apache helicopters was working around the clock way before the Second Lebanon War. Their main mission is to try and stop the bombardment of the Hezbollah. No, not the Hezbollah, the Hamas in the south of Israel. So they're basically up in the air all day or all night, and in between they would fly to Tel Aviv on like a small, aircraft, go out, have a good time, go to all the bars, go to the restaurants, live life to the fullest, and then the next day they'd go at it. They'd have to, be in their top form with the various missions that they had to do in order to, as the Israeli Air Force's main goal is to minimize and actually zero civilian casualties. These pilots need to be very precise and very accurate, and they need to be able to function at their fullest abilities. So the idea that you go and for 12, 14 hours you're fighting, even though there's no war, there is still missions. And day-to-day missions. It's not like once a week, it's every day. And then go back to Tel Aviv in the evening, meet up with friends, and live life to the fullest.
Yeah. And as a mother with a son living that life and in a high-risk unit, you have spoken of surviving by locking out the worry and refusing to let it rule your life. But in that fateful week of July 2006, you mentioned things felt a little different.
Yes. During at the beginning of July, actually Tom was supposed to fly to Canada for his summer vacation, and he decided to cancel his vacation as the escalation in the north of Israel with bombardments of the Hezbollah onto Israeli settlements in the north. The squadron was then doing double duty, also the south of Israel and the north of Israel, and Tom couldn't see himself going on vacation and not being there. Tom was up in the air for 12 to 13 hours, saw a lot of casualties, was feeling real danger because helicopters, as we know, fly low. And it put a lot of strain on him. They were basically flying about 12 hours a day, going for short naps, getting up in the air again, and on and on and on. Tom came home the Saturday before he was killed. He was killed on a Monday. The Saturday he got leave for a few hours, came home, and he talked about the stress that he was under, and I understood the dangers of this particular kind of situation, especially with the weapons that Hezbollah has and their capabilities. And I just became scared. We were being bombarded all over. Civilians were being bombarded from north to south, and my son was was up in the air in Lebanon, and I realized that the odds were starting to mount up against him.
Yeah. And let's talk about the song, A Million Kochavim, A Million Stars. It was written within hours, I understand, of you hearing the news of Tom's death. What happened there?
I'd like to give a little bit of an explanation about the hours. On the 24th of July, that was the day that Tom was killed, I got up, went to work, and I just couldn't function. So I decided to go home. On the way, I stopped for a coffee with a friend. I wanted to share with her my fears. And at 11:15, I got a text message from another friend that a helicopter had been downed. I called the squadron, and nobody can give me a straight answer. So I realized that it must be Tom. And then I went home. The house started filling up with people. I wanted to be there for my daughters, my 11-year-old daughter Ori and my 17-year-old daughter Amit. But the house kept filling up with people, and we kept calling the squadron, asking for somebody to come and let us know what was going on. About 5 hours later, people entered our house, the notifiers, and I basically asked them to go away because I didn't want to hear what they had to say. As the house was being filled, one of the people who filled the house was the son of neighbors and friends. My husband and the father of Yiftach Krezhner, who wrote A Million Stars, were buddies in the Air Force. They were both in the Air Force together, and they had moved to Caesarea. And Yiftach became good friends with Amit and Tom. He was in between both their ages. And he asked Amit, "What can I do for you?" She said, "Can you please write me a song that I could say goodbye to my brother at his funeral?" And that was how the song was born.
Because Amit and Tom played a lot of music together.
Yes, actually, between Amit and Tom, there's a 6 years difference. So the one thing that really connected them at this point in their lives, when she was still a young girl and a teenager, and when he went to the army, she was still, a young teenager, and he was already away from the house. And the one thing that connected them all the time, because of their age difference, was their love of music. Amit had a beautiful voice. Tom played the guitar nonstop. He loved playing the guitar. The guitar was connected to his hand as though it was part of his body. And this love of music was what connected them to each other. And during all our family functions, whether it was Chag or just a Friday night dinner, the guitar would come out, and they would sing, and we would all sing along. So saying goodbye to her brother with a song is very meaningful to her. That was her way of expressing their mutual love to each other and to music.
And Anat, in terms of other things in Tom's memory, you have created an educational foundation through an organic orchard in Hof HaCarmel. At the Bustan, you teach, I think, you teach values of the agricultural movement as a route to personal empowerment. What can you tell us in the short time we have, just some of those values, some of those thoughts that you share?
Well, I don't know if you got the gist of it, but Tom really, really loved life and all it had to offer. And but on the other hand, he was very quiet and humble. And what we wanted to do was to continue his legacy. We wanted to do something that sort of showed what Tom was all about. And we found that one of the things that we need to really, not only he wanted to protect the citizens of Israel and all the Jews in the world by making sure that the country is sustainable. And we found that we have to protect, in order for Israel and the people living here to be to have a sustainable existence, we also need to take care of the food we eat, the air we breathe, and the water we drink. Therefore, we decided to set up an agricultural learning center that teaches the organic way of life and the values of coexistence between man and nature, man and man, taking personal responsibility, health, and fairness. And these values are taught through various ways. We basically, the people that run the agricultural farm are all volunteers. So the people who come and visit actually see the volunteers. A lot of the people that come and visit will actually volunteer and help us upkeep the orchard. And by doing so, we empower them and we give them a little taste of what it feels like to do something for the society you live in. And by this, we hope to make a change that in their empowerment and their need to continue and do something for other people.
Yeah.
And
Well,
these are the values of Tom actually as well.
Yeah, you when we spoke, you mentioned that, so that you don't feel that Tom, died in vain, that his sacrifice was for everyone, was for the nation. You shared this thought that that he felt that he wasn't fighting just for one particular political, part of the world, one political religious group. He was there for he was fighting for the nation.
I really believe that all the soldiers, not just Tom, that not only died but fight, do what they do every day by endangering their lives and giving of themselves to the society they live in. The soldiers and anybody that gives to the society that lives in contributes greatly to the existence of others. Tom believed that we have no other homeland, not only just for the citizens of Israel, but for all the Jewish nation. The Israel as a home, as a homeland, its existence was very, very important. And we have to do everything to ensure that this is a quality existence with values that across that have no political agenda, no religious agenda, and no affiliation to anything. It's just one for all and all for one.
Well, look, Anat, thank you very, very much. I think that's a perfect note to end on. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for inspiring us. And thank you for helping us to honor Tom's memory.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
As we heard, the song Milyon Kochavim was written by Yiftach Kresner only hours after Tom's passing. Not only did it become an immediate hit, sung by Amit, Tom's sister, but she then performed it at Israel's official Yom Hazikaron ceremony in 2012 on Har Herzl. The words from their translation will now be read by Leah Harris and Dorina Fartuk. Leah, from Leeds, is a recent participant in UJIA's popular Israel Bar and Bat Mitzvah program. And Dorina joins us from Israel, where she lives at the Carmel Youth Village, which is one of the incredible projects that UJIA supports in the Galil. We will then hear the song itself, sung by Tom's sister, Amit.
Milyon Kochavim.
You wanted to fly, you wanted to get away. With a little smile, you went up.
רצית לעוף, רצית כבר הלאה. עם חצי חיוך, עלית למעלה.
A million stars in the sky are catching the color of your eyes.
מיליון כוכבים בשמיים, תופסים את הצבע שלך בעיניים.
I only wish I could have a moment to say goodbye.
תן רק עוד שנייה אחת, לומר לך שלום.
You wanted to fly, you went too far.
רצית לעוף, הלכת רחוק מדי.
Inside this madness, there's no one to protect me.
בתוך הטירוף, אין מי שישמור עליי.
A million stars in the sky are catching the color of your eyes.
מיליון כוכבים בשמיים, תופסים את הצבע שלך בעיניים.
I only wish I could have a moment to say goodbye.
רציתי שנייה אחת לומר לך שלום.
I wanted to sing, you picked up a guitar. An angel plays for me now, for I am singing with you.
אני רציתי לשיר, אתה הרמת גיטרה. מלאך מנגן לי עכשיו, אז איתך נשארה.
A million stars in the sky are catching the color of your eyes.
מיליון כוכבים בשמיים, תופסים את הצבע שלך בעיניים.
I wanted to sing for you, to say goodbye. I wanted a moment to say goodbye to you.
רציתי לשיר לך, לומר לך שלום. רציתי שנייה אחת לומר לך שלום.
I only wish I could have a moment to say goodbye to you.
תן רק עוד שנייה אחת לומר לך שלום.
רצית לעוף, רצית כבר הלאה, עם חצי חיוך, עלית למעלה, מיליון כוכבים בשמיים תופסים את הצבע שלך בעיניים. תן רק עוד שנייה אחת לומר לך שלום. רצית לעוף, הלכת רחוק מדי בתוך הטירוף, אין מי שישמור עליי. מיליון כוכבים בשמיים תופסים את הצבע שלך בעיניים. רציתי שנייה אחת לומר לך שלום. אני רציתי לשיר, אתה הרמת גיטרה, מלאך מנגן לי עכשיו, אז איתך אני שרה. מיליון כוכבים בשמיים תופסים את הצבע שלך בעיניים. רציתי לשיר לך, לומר לך שלום. רציתי שנייה אחת לומר לך שלום. תן רק עוד שנייה אחת לומר לך שלום. ביי טוב.
It is now a great honor to introduce Chief Rabbi Ephraim Mirvis to recite El Malei Rachamim.
In memory of Anat Farkash, and in the memory of all of Israel's fallen soldiers and victims of terror, I will now recite the memorial prayer, El Malei Rachamim. El Malei Rachamim, Shochein Bamromim, המציעים מנוחה נכונה תחת כנפי השכינה, במעלות קדושים וטהורים, כזוהר הרקיע מזהירים, לנשמות הקדושים שנלחמו בכל מערכות ישראל, במחתרת ובצבא הגנה לישראל, ושנפלו במלחמתם ומסרו נפשם על קדושת השם העם והארץ. בארץ, וכל אלה שנרצחו בארץ ומחוצה לה על ידי מעשי חבלה. בעבור שאנו מתפללים לעילוי נשמותיהם. לכן ברא רחמים יסתירם בסתר כנפיו לעולמים, ויצרור בצרור החיים את נשמותיהם. אדוני הוא נחלתם, בגן עדן מנוחתם, וינוחו בשלום המשכבותם, ותעמוד לכל ישראל זכותם, ויעמדו לגורלם לקץ הימין, ונאמר Amen.
Thank you, Chief Rabbi. Colonel Tidhar, Israel's defense attaché of the UK, will now say a few words. Colonel Dar is the representative in the UK of Israel's Minister of Defense and is the representative of the Chief of Staff of the Israel Defense Forces.
Dear families, dear community, and distinguished guests, we have gathered here today to commemorate our sons and daughters who have fallen for our independence and freedom. Although it is not a religious day, the Jewish community here in the UK and abroad are once again united together with Israelis in our country and around the world in remembrance of those who had served our people and did not return. I used to speak in front of my soldiers on this day. However, speaking here today as the defense attaché to the UK makes me feel natural and proud, since you are part of our people who we are obligated to defend. During my post here in the UK, I have met with many people who care about and cherish the state of Israel in general and the IDF in particular. I have also met wonderful parents who have sons and daughters that served or still serve in the IDF. As someone who has commanded and met many of the soldiers that are called lone soldiers from the UK and abroad, I must say that I am full of admiration for the choice to be part of the IDF and for you as a community that supports them and encourages them to contribute and to serve the state of Israel. Today, when we remember our fallen, we also remember that many of them were born in Manchester, in Glasgow, in Leeds and London, and in many other places across the UK and around the world. They were Jews who felt the calling to come to Israel. Many came to defend it, others came to study, to work, or just to visit. They became Israelis and they paid the ultimate price. The commemoration of the fallen is a moral duty of society, even more so for brothers in arms. Furthermore, it carries a great responsibility as it is the source of strength and faith that their sacrifice wasn't in vain. May the heroes of the State of Israel be remembered forever.
Thank you, Colonel. Before we close this evening's tekes, I would like to thank all those in the UJIA team who have helped us put this ceremony together. And of course, a heartfelt thank you to our guests and for you all for joining us. And so, to conclude, I am delighted to welcome Chazan Albi Chait, Senior Minister of the United Hebrew Congregation in Leeds, and Chazan Tzvi Weiss of the Great Synagogue in Jerusalem. Chazan Chait will be well known and well loved by many of you, I'm sure. He was just voted a Jewish Chronicle COVID hero for his fantastic music streaming services, which have gained a huge following throughout lockdown. And Chazan Weiss has sung many of the official ceremonies in Israel, and last year he moved us all on Yom Hazikaron, singing from the bimah of the beautiful Great Synagogue itself. Please be upstanding and join Chazan Chait for the National Anthem, and then Chazan Weiss, who will lead us in Hatikva. Toda and Laila Tov.
Ben, thank you so much for the opportunity this evening to lead our British National Anthem on this Yom Hazikaron this year. Allow me just to give a short introduction by saying how special it is in our culture that in happy and challenging times in our lives, we always include our British National Anthem and Israeli National Anthem also. We are so proud as British Jews with a huge love for the state of Israel. The British National Anthem. God save our gracious Queen, long live our noble Queen, God save the Queen. Send her victorious, happy and glorious, long to reign over us. God save the Queen.
עולות בלבב פנימה, נפש יהודי הומיה, ולפתי מזרח קדימה, עין לציון צופיה. עוד לא אבדה תקוותנו, התקווה בת שנות 2000, להיות עם חופשי בארצנו, ארץ ציון וירושלים. להיות עם חופשי בארצנו,